I have to touch back
everything in a way.
We've been off.
So mine's off.
Yeah,
That's good.
that's fine. Yeah, just I'm gonna keep it as a particular item.
I know.
Now I've got to see Tim sent me an update. I don't know how they managed. Let's see.
Do you have anything? Nope, nothing. Everything's down. So, yeah, so the long story short is no internet, so the stuff that I had, some information I hope to have for you today, we just don't have, but we have the access to our network at least. So we can go through the items that are on the agenda. We can just reconfigure them a little bit. Shouldn't be too much impact for the group. And then sitting up here at the dais, like I mentioned in the email to the group, we're recording the meetings. We have the ability, when the internet works, to record the meetings automatically without having an AV tech run both the visual and the sound, as long as there's one camera on and I hit a couple of buttons that hopefully I can remember to hit at the beginning at the start of this. So it'll be a great way to record the meetings. If anybody has a question, somebody misses a meeting, or if there's a potential candidate who wants to find out what happens at a meeting, they can watch one.
Okay.
So we're trying to make use of the IT capacity that's been added to the town over the last couple of years. And this is a great upgrade for us. There'll be some additional changes in this room over the next couple of months, and some upgrades to some of the cabling that will help make it a little easier on staff's end to make sure that we do this right, and hopefully have a little bit higher quality recording. That'll be behind the scenes. So looking forward to doing this for a while. A lot of jurisdictions around here record advisory committee meetings and commission meetings, and it's an additional way to make the town available to folks who are interested in it. So I heard from Joe and from Corinne. Corinne said she was going to be here. Joe's out of town. And I haven't heard from Laura or Rachel. Wi-Fi?
Did you guys need it?
Sure. So Nadine, probably hearing me whine on the broadcast, has a Wi-Fi card jetpack. Somebody wants to use this. I think we can host 4 people with one of these.
I'd say usually can you do 15, but I say you just go ahead and use it for what you need to bring up.
I need it on the screen, so you can't plug into the to the desktop computers.
Okay.
If somebody is interested in accessing this, you can read the code on the back, or I can just type it above the screen.
So should we go ahead and call to order then?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay. So I say, let's just go ahead and call to order RCAC meeting, what is it, May 14th? All right. And Martin, if you wouldn't mind doing roll call, because I am miserable at it.
Sure, so maybe just announce the folks that are here, and then I'll note in the meeting notes who isn't here. Tommy Sun's here, Ann Shanahan, and Michelle Horton, and Kimberly Owens, along with trustee Joe Sorelli as the town board liaison. So the meeting for May 14th, 2015 is noted.
Great, so we just want to go ahead and start with our normal agenda items. Looks like we have one member of the public, but I think that he's here for a discussion later on the agenda.
No, I'm just here from the liaison from the...
Sounds great.
So he's quasi-public.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to item number 3 then, new business and updates. And we're going to have an events recap of the household hazardous waste, hard to recycle collection, and the Arbor Day. Are you able to provide that, Martin?
I am, thank you. So I left these on the agenda. There's some, like you guys know, I sometimes hold over items from month to month to make sure they don't necessarily fall off the radar. So we had events as an upcoming item for several meetings of this group, and then I wanted to include just a recap and go through a couple of other items as new business and update items. So I can just go down the list fairly quickly. Before I start, I noted the code for the MiFi card on the screen, and that's the code if anybody wants to access their access the internet wirelessly through a device that you might have, if you don't have cell service. So first on the list, the Household Hazardous Waste and Hard to Recycle Collection event went really well despite the weather last month. Thank you, Kim, for coming out, and a couple of other members. Aaliyah was there also. And then Rachel went to the Arbor Day event. We'll talk about that next, but it was cold and snowy for a while, then it was cold and rainy for a while, and then at the end, the last hour or so of the event, it actually brightened up. Positively, the positive note is there were nearly 150 people who came to drop off materials, but because of the weather, we couldn't necessarily use the tick sheets, and Tanya was there also to track whether people were dropping off chemicals or whether they were dropping off electronics or if they were coming there for some other reason. We try to segregate out what people drop off, but by the time the paper was wet enough and had been rained out long enough, it wasn't worth the fight to try and track it anymore. I tried to track some on our phones. I got a reasonable idea of the split, and the split was kind of similar to what it had been in previous years. But thanks very much to the folks who made the time to come out and help. Having that point of entry and information for folks to help them get situated at the beginning or of what can be kind of a circuitous route to get material dropped off with both the EcoCycle and the Charm folks, and then also as the Boulder County Household Hazardous Waste Management folks. Helping get folks through that line is always great, so I appreciate your help. It turned out to be a great event. One follow-up on note I had from last month, or maybe the month before last, was a discussion with the county on whether or not having that date, the Household Hazardous Waste and Hard to Recycle event, could happen on another date, because like you guys know, everybody's spring schedules get very full very fast, including the county staff who are responsible for this. This is the timeline that works for them. A fall timeline doesn't work for them. So having the spring Household Hazardous Waste event is what works for their schedule with their contractors. So just a quick follow-up item. I'll let Rachel know that when she's able to be here. Arbor Day event, I wasn't there. I was at the Household Hazardous Waste event. My understanding from staff is that the event went well. Although it was cold, it ended a little earlier, so it was mostly in the weather for the duration of the event. But it went well, and there were some great trees planted, and Rachel had a chance to be there. And the information I got from staff is that the interaction between the arborists and the presenters there, and also the kids' activities and having the additional volunteers from the Youth Leadership Council went well. And even despite the weather, it was still a good event, which is always encouraging. So those are the two events, and then the one that's just started this week is the next on the agenda, the Document Shredding and Electronics Recycling event. Started with Guardian Storage, the storage facility on 76th Street right behind the Target Costco development at the Marketplace. They started their event this week, and like I've mentioned, over the last couple of months, they've been able to extend their time to accept materials for shredding and also for electronics recycling through the end of the month. They'll be closed on Monday the 25th for Memorial Day. But other than that, they'll be open their regular hours, and we've talked a little bit about that. So like you've seen in the newsletter, and you've also seen a couple of separate e-blasts, we've done what we can to publicize that, and it's also on the cover of the, where the homepage has a direct link to it under the news. A couple of other items that were in the newsletter. If you I didn't include these on the agenda, but if you looked at the newsletter, had a chance to go to our homepage, you've seen the bulk item waste pickup alternatives list is there, and it's been on the cover of the homepage for a while. And I've gotten some calls and some folks who appreciated having a list of alternatives to discard items in ways that help reduce the amount that went to landfill. So there's been some good response to that. Next, the compost pickup service, the coordinated promotion with the Rock Creek Master Homeowners Association. It's a holdover item. Wanted to bring that up for the group in case you didn't, again, if you didn't see the newsletter or haven't had a chance to check out the information on the town's website. It was a great endeavor between Jim and the other folks at the Rock Creek HOA, and then again, Ann, thanks for helping assemble the flyer, and the information for both the town and the HOA has been listed on the website and linked through the town newsletter, and it's actually out front here if you look in the breezeway as you enter the building, and then also at the front desk folks who come in with questions about how to do any of those, because this is just that time of year. I get questions, other folks, people just walking in to pay a bill or sign up for a class will ask questions about either bulk item service or potentially about compost pickup service. So having some literature here and then also having the information available on the website. It's been a great ad.
And that's on the website and the HOA's website?
I haven't had a chance to look at the HOA's website. I can't bring it up right now.
I mean, ours is on the website. I mean, the HOA's is on the website.
So just to repeat for the benefit of the recording, Jim Payne in the audience let us know that the information for the Rock Creek Homeowners Association is posted on the HOA's website. Again, thanks for doing
So
that.
that part's going to be, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for doing that, Jim. It was great to have it on there. I haven't heard from the account folks at Waste Connections about the number of folks that are subscribed. I just haven't heard from them. But as the season moves along, we'll see if we can get an idea or an accounting of how many folks have signed up for this optional subscription service. Next.
Actually, can we break for a moment and go over a couple of those things, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Now, I need to look at the compost pickup, I have to say. I mean, I'm sorry that I've been gone for a few months, just the schedule was not good. But I would like to have more information on that, just in a general sense. So what are we doing with the compost thing?
The optional service is provided through Waste Connections.
So just promoting what was there? Okay.
We got the information from Waste Connections on how they coordinate the service and how to sign up for it. Put it on a flyer, and then the Rock Creek HOA assembled some information about their spectrum of waste services.
Oh, good. Okay.
The information about who they serve, what they serve, and what services are provided. And we each have our own flyers, and those were available at Arbor Day, and then they're linked through the website, and then again out front here.
Excellent, you guys rock. So back on the household hazardous waste, so I know you said, are they going to be keeping the same dates next year, was a question that you had for them, is that right?
There was a discussion, maybe you weren't there, Michelle, so...
No, I wasn't.
So the discussion was with the seasonality of it, not necessarily the same date every spring.
Okay.
But whether or not it would make sense to have it in the fall as opposed to the spring when the spring schedule is.
All right. I think spring works well, because I think people, regardless of whether or not the town is doing the bulk item cleanup, I think people are thinking a lot more about it when they're doing the garage sale and things like that, or considering it. I don't know what everybody else thinks. I think my biggest objection to this year was that it was a 4-day weekend for school, and I was gone. I know many other people were gone. So that was kind of not really good timing at all. But I'm glad to hear that the participation numbers were okay, because what were they kind of relative to last year?
They were in the 180 range last year, 184 last year.
So we're not horribly far off, which is good. I mean, I'm bummed because I have a lot of stuff that I need to deal with still, that I need to dispose of. So, good. So when do you think you'll be able to find out the dates about that with them? Because we are going to, again, as this district is going to have another 4-day weekend next year at that same about time range. So it'd be great to kind of not have it then.
So we'll work to have it on a weekend that works for most people most of the time, which is our intent for all events.
Yeah.
But until the county has a chance to figure out how they're all 6 or so or half dozen of the household events that they conduct on site in the jurisdictions around the county, we're not the only ones. So
Yeah, clearly.
They coordinate several schedules for both the jurisdictions and then also their contractors and their staff. So if I remember correctly, we were able to determine this maybe around Thanksgiving of this past year and have it before an idea of what their schedule was going to be like before the end of the year, and then to begin to roll that out.
Okay, good.
We'll shoot to do the same thing.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just keeping that in mind too, because it's the district calendar is already out, so it'd be great to kind of keep an eye on that they have that 4-day weekend again, April 15th through the 18th. So it'd be great to have it on a non-holiday weekend.
That would be optimal, yes.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for all you do. I don't know if anybody else had any questions regarding those events at all. I appreciate those who were able to go. So we were freezing our butts off somewhere else.
Martin, I have 1 or 2 comments.
Sure, would you mind going up? Thanks.
Our new formal system here, so. Okay, Jim Payne, Rock Creek, Rock Creek HOA. Just a couple things on the, one thing we've noticed on the composting, so Michelle, you can see it obviously, but at the event, Arbor Day, we each had a flyer. They're essentially the same, but there are some differences. For example, since Rock Creek picks up recycling every week, the composting is on Mondays. The composting is on Thursdays every other week. Now, that's the same for the town, but it gets complicated when you start, every other week, look at the calendar, the A circles A's or this, that. So we just listed the dates. We said composting pickup is on these dates, Thursday, April 18th, Thursday, April, whatever. And I think it's not that many dates, and I think it's a lot clearer for people, so I just make that observation. The other thing I just wanted to give you a brief update on, this is not composting, and I'll start by asking Tanya, did you get your bin yet?
Yes.
Okay, so-
It was yesterday, yes.
Yeah, so there's no question that the one problem, by far the biggest problem we've had historically and recently is replacement bins, and this continues to be a problem. When Calamonte, the last 5 units that opened up, they needed to get bins. Now, that's the town's contract, but there were no bins, and we worked with the town on exerting what influence we had to get the bins to the Calamonte folks. But they just don't have bins sitting around. And so anyway, we have been told that they've gotten some inventory of bins in, and all I can say is that from our vantage point, we'll continue to work on that and find longer-term solutions, but it does continue to be a problem. And then the other thing, this is jumping a minute from trash to something else, though, that and this came up in the HOA board had its joint work session with the town board last Monday night, and this was one of the subjects that came up, asking about our ground rules for grass and xeriscaping, and grass versus xeriscaping. And I can't say it enough, I say it every time I'm asked, and we're fully supportive of xeriscaping, not rockscaping, but xeriscaping. And so the same 75% coverage rule still applies, but it doesn't have to be grass. It can be other kinds of grass. It can be, which we've done, we've worked with homeowners who've been experimenting with different types of water-resistant, or not water-resistant, drought-resistant grass. But xeriscaping with other kinds of ground cover, and of course there are a lot of very rich things you can do in xeriscaping that meet the 75%. And the problem is that when somebody plants a xeriscape garden, you don't know, it can take 2 years before it really grows in. And a good example is a house right on the bottom of Marble, where Marble meets, I think it's the first house on the east side, where Marble meets Topaz. And that homeowner put it, a couple years, 2 years ago, whenever it was, she just ripped out her lawn. She was having trouble she was having trouble with a lot, but she ripped out all of the lawn and just put in wood mulch, and the phone started ringing, and and we went down and worked with her, and her intention had been to xeriscape it, and it took some time, and we worked with the town on getting suggestions for ground cover and everything else, and she finally did it, everything was fine, she put some money into it and did a nice job, and then it took a year or so, and now it's beginning to grow in quite nicely, but at any rate, the reason I'm bringing it up is a couple years ago when RCAC sponsored a xeriscape seminar or workshop, and it was poorly attended because it was like the day before Easter or something. I was there, but not many people were. But I still think it's a great idea, and we would love to cooperate and coordinate with you on promoting xeriscaping. So don't make any mistake about our position on that. We encourage it, and we'd love to promote it, and we'd love to find a way to work with the town on promoting it.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, the 75% is the whole of the front and the back, correct?
75% is the whole of the front and the back, which is a covenant. So that's immovable. That means what they call the unimproved lot. So that's essentially the original house and hardscape. Now, if you keep adding hardscape, it doesn't, you go back to the original hardscape, house and hardscape. Everything else has to be 75. But we as a guideline, we approach that front and back. But that's where we have some wiggle room. So we'll essentially go to 50% in either front or back. So that's where we have a little bit of wiggle room, but.
Yeah, that's great to reinforce that, thanks. All right, so I guess back to the agenda then. I know I took you off track there, Martin, so if you want to continue on then with F, that would be great.
Sure, thank you. And thanks, Jim, for bringing up those points. It was great. The town board did have a joint dinner with the Rock Creek HOA board this past Monday, and it was a great discussion, including some landscape topics and fence and some other topics. It was a great discussion. And the topic of landscapes always comes up, so it's very timely. So thank you, Jim. And then the workshop that you referred to was from several years ago, yes, and it might be something to consider. And when we get down to the item G, budget schedule, maybe to think about some programming items for next year's budget. F, so committee reappointment schedule, so staying on schedule. So the town adopted an ordinance in 2012 that included a stagger pattern for all the positions that are established and appointed by the town board to serve on committees. And there are 3 positions that come up for either appointment or reappointment or for new people to serve on them every year. And this year, the three positions are Rachel's and your position, your slot, and then also Tanya. You're all eligible for reappointment. I'm not going to put you on the spot now, but I wanted to let you know that I'll either email you or call you, or you can email or call me and let me know that if you are interested in being considered for reappointment for a subsequent 3-year term.
In what month does that occur, in a specific month, or is it?
June 30th is when all of the appointments end for that calendar year, and then in July would be so June 30th would be the last day of appointment, and then July 1st would be the first day of the next year's cycle.
And the next appointment will go for another 2 years?
3
years, okay.
And then what's the term limits?
2 3-year terms. So I'll follow up with you offline and double check what your plans are going forward for your interest in considering continuing with this committee. And then I alluded to the budget schedule, so if there aren't any questions on the reappointment schedule, I'll move on to budget. So like I've let you guys know before in the past, staff is working on budget items all year round, and now is the official time when we kick off our budget season. Next month, the Internal Budget Review Committee meets, and we begin to go through each of the departmental operating, capital, and utility budgets. And it takes a couple of months, and then in August, the town board will receive the preliminary balanced budget for 2016. So I'm not going to go through I have our internal calendar is up on the screen, but I wanted to highlight one date for you. The board members are going to begin their review in August of the preliminary balanced budget for next year. And the date, if you are interested in how the cycle works, will begin in August. August 21st is the first finance committee of the town board to begin their review. And that'll be most of the afternoon, 2 to 5. And then there will be a couple of additional meetings scheduled, and it will come for the budget. The final budget will come for consideration in the fall. So I wanted to highlight that for you, number 1, just kind of the big picture schedule. And then number 2, I wanted to let you know, or just place as a reminder, since we didn't have quorum last month, we didn't really have a chance to delve too much into any potential budget items that this committee would consider recommending for next year's budget. So if this is a note here to bring those next month. There are a couple of things that were noted in the work plan that escape my mind. So the dog waste compost program has been great so far. So that would be an item to potentially consider recommending for continuation next year. there was a couple of other items. I think it was the curbs, special event to have curbside leaf pickup. I can bring this up if you bear with me for 1 second. But the budget recommendations that are going to be necessary for the Internal Budget Review Committee to consider for next year's budget will need to wrap up. And it'd be great, optimal to have for next month's meeting. So I'm raising that as an item now. So a second quarter item for budget recommendations, dog park compost program, the single can replacement with the dual cans at the town facilities. I skipped that on the update items. I gave the update on that last month. That the town indeed did receive a grant that I ended up working on right before it was due and was awarded. The curbside organic event, and then also staffing resources. The idea of having some program staff to actually carry out some of the program activities rather than having an administrative staff member like me ending up trying to work some of these tasks in given our current staffing resources. So next month would be the opportunity to think about a more formal discussion of these and consider either recommending them, changing them, whatever the committee might be interested in. So I wanted to raise that as a placeholder for next month's meeting. That was what I had for new business and updates. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to give them a shot.
Anybody have any questions? We're good? I'm good. So I guess we'll just move on to item 4 then.
Item 4, so Michelle, thanks for helping me get kind of through this. So the discussion item, the main discussion item for this month, and we were hoping to spend some time on it last month, but we didn't have quorum, just people's schedules didn't allow for them to be here, was to continue the review of, number 1, the scope items. The questionnaire that was sent out to all customers who have waste services, trash and recycling service through the town. It's upwards of 400 folks between the 4 neighborhoods that you see up there, Sagamore, Ridge, Ridgetown, and Calmonte. Going over the feedback from the citizens who responded to the online questionnaire, and also a few hard copies. We had some written copies that were manually entered into the software. So like I mentioned in the email with the agenda, we were up to 120 folks out of 380-ish or so town trash utility customers. So we had some good feedback, and I've had a chance to send this to you for a couple of months, so hopefully you've had a chance to go through it. Last month I promised you that I would collect maybe some highlights or maybe some headlines from this rather than going through the 13 pages. So I wanted to go over that briefly, and then if it might make sense for the group to consider some draft scope elements. The take-home point, as I mentioned last month with the group not having quorum, the board is scheduled to consider scope elements for this contract at their meeting, their second meeting this month. So that's May 26th, the day after the holiday. So it would be great to have some feedback from this group to include for the board's dialogue on this. So that was my tentative plan, if that would work for the group. So if you had a chance to go through this, the 13 pages that include a little bit of demographic data on where folks live, how satisfied folks are, and then several interesting comments just on all sides of the questions of whether or not they're satisfied with their current trash and recycling service. Idea of whether or not folks would be interested in having individual size choice of the different containers, the different waste and recycling containers, and willingness or tolerance to pay more per month for those additional services. Having weekly or bi-weekly yard waste and curbside compostables collection, and then tolerance to pay, and what that would be with the bands, kind of $0 to $2, $0 to $2, $2 to $5, and then $5 to $8, which seem to be kind of the market rates for those when we look at the contracts that have been issued around the region. Adding weekly recycling instead of the current every other week, and tolerance to pay an additional fee, and then the idea of adopting a pay-as-you-throw approach, a volume-based approach to disposal rather than a flat fee. So there's some additional comments if you had to go through them. I'm going to just touch on some of the highlights, and with the time that you have left, I'd like to touch on, let's see, some of the main feedback items. So satisfaction levels, I had eight points here, some of which were based on comments. So kind of going through chronologically, the questionnaire results. I wanted to just touch on the headlines, and if there's anything that you guys wanted to maybe follow up on or delve into in some more detail, feel free to interrupt. But these were the main kind of headlines that I got out of this. And thinking about how to frame the scope, or perhaps how to provide some feedback for the town board to consider as they review and decide and determine what to include in the scope that goes out for bid later this year. So overall satisfaction level, if you had a chance to go through them, you saw that between the very satisfied and the somewhat satisfied was nearly 90%. So a strong sense that people are happy with the current level of service, or at least what the service is for the amount that they pay, which is kind of the key balancing point. Cart size options. So we had a couple of, the next question asked about whether or not folks were interested in having an option to choose different cart sizes. So as you can tell from the response there. Thanks, Jim. 69%.
Looking for the HOPP and an architectural request. I said, what did you look at?
Came to the right place at the right time. That's funny. So the choices that are mentioned, or the choices that are listed, if you add them up, 69% were interested in having an opportunity or an option to choose different cart sizes. Not necessarily larger or smaller, just have the idea of being able to choose different cart sizes. And then of the folks who did want it, who chose yes on that question, 79% self-reported of those respondents said that they wanted it, but they aren't willing to pay more than an additional $2 per month for this service. So again, balancing a little bit of the desire for additional services, but perhaps some hesitancy on increasing cost. And then compostable service, the organic service. There was a couple of questions on this. So 63% weren't interested in having yard waste and compostables service added to their current menu or the current contract. And I listed there just a couple of possible reasons just so I could remember to bring them up. You know, it's an additional cost add that folks would be required to pay if they wanted to have this additional service. And then space. You know, we talked a little bit about, and mentioned some of the challenges that some people have if they're in multifamily, or if they have a smaller house, or just depending on their individual home configuration. Having 3 carts can be a challenge. So maybe there would be some, I'm just raising that as a potential point. And then of the folks who did want to have the compostables or the curbside organic pickup, 35% of those who said that they do want it, they're willing to pay slightly more. 55% said that they were willing to pay up to $2 more per month, and 36% said they would be willing to pay $2 to $5. So a little broader brand, a little broader band of interest for having compostable service added. And then the next question was about recycling. Just to get an idea from the folks who responded to the questionnaire, whether or not they were willing or interested in having weekly service. Like you've heard in the past, the HOA's trash contract and waste contract includes weekly pickup of recycling, and the town's doesn't. So to change that from bi-weekly to weekly service, how many folks would be generally interested in having that add? 72% of the folks who responded said they were interested in this. And then of the folks who said that they were interested in having this, their willingness to pay was in the 0 to 2 range at 69%. So those were kind of the main variables that we talked about over the last few months. And then in March, when this went out, got some pretty good feedback from over 100 folks. And then the last question was on the pay-as-you-throw approach to waste and recycling and compost collection. The idea that instead of having a flat rate fee like we have now, to switch to a unit-based or volume-based collection service where you would pay a bill that's tied to the amount of the size of the trash can that you're interested in having. So 63% were in favor of this approach. Some of the concerns like we talked about in the past, I noted just in this summary sheet, the logistics of carts and distribution, like you've heard Jim and I talk about over the last couple of months, and then also the administration of having to track individual customers with different size carts and different rates for each of those is going to potentially have some impact on the overhead, the cost to administer a program like that. So maybe there's some folks who are responding to that, if you saw in the comments. And then I noted there were several positive and several negative comments. A couple of people just wanted to have additional detail on what it would look like if the town were to consider a shift in approach from a flat rate service to a pay-as-you-throw volume-based service, what that would look like. If you think back to the trash and recycling discussion from 2011 and 2012, that was a central point of the discussion, the policy level discussion that the board had at that time. And where the board landed at that time was to stay with a flat rate, like you see now. And the town's trash bill, which is the $9.65 a month for the 296-gallon trash and recycling containers, weekly service for trash, and then bi-weekly for recycling. So those were the main variables. I wanted to just try and capture those in just a couple of minutes rather than going through the detail of the summary sheet that I emailed to you. But if there was something here that you thought might make sense to go through with the group, or if there was something that I missed just in that summary and you thought might make sense for the group, feel free to jump in.
So I guess I'm confused as to what you're looking for us. You want us to add to what you had on your inside of the results, or what were you looking for?
Well, I apologize if I wasn't clear. So I wanted to try and capture some of the headlines.
Okay.
I wanted to maybe, rather than go through each of the 13 pages and all the comments and try to help figure out what bar graphs mean, just capture them here, and just as a summary.
I thought it was really interesting that even though when you said, do you want more frequent recycling, they said no, like, almost like a 70-30. I'm not sure, I thought the question was pretty clear, but I would almost be concerned that they didn't read that correctly, because in the comments, every third comment was, we need more regular recycling pickup. So I thought that was kind of skewed. I almost wonder if that question didn't get processed correctly, if you know what I mean?
Sure.
Because I thought it was, the responses yes and no didn't match the comments at all. It was a very regular, we need more frequent recycling pickup. So I thought that was interesting, and also how positive they were about the pay-as-you-throw concept.
Well, yeah, I agree, Michelle. There were several folks who in their comments who listed they were really interested in having some of these additional services, but there were several people who were absolutely against any change in the service or any price increase in the service. And that came through in a couple of sections that had comments. So I would not want to necessarily gauge community-wide interest from the feedback questions, but there are definitely a lot of folks, I agree, that were interested in having additional recycling service. But there were a lot of folks who were interested in not adding it, and I want to at least preliminarily ascribe that to the fact that they would have a price impact. It would be, the additional service would have an additional price increase, and I would ascribe that to maybe to lack of intolerance or not interest.
No, I agree. It's one of those things that after the fact, because I thought that the questions were done really well, we give a lot of thought into them, but I almost wonder now, based on seeing what I saw, if you gave the alternative, would you prefer to have weekly recycle pickup and bi-weekly trash pickup, if that would have gotten a very positive response, just based on what I'm seeing?
Sure.
Switching it, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't include that as a question.
May, comment? I just observe and have a fair amount of experience in this, and I know Ann has some too, but you really have to really get at the root of that. You need to tie it to the money. You need to say, this is a scenario A, this is scenario B, it would cost X, Y, and Z, and sort of get at the trade-offs that people are willing to make when you throw in the financial side. Pay-as-you-go sounds great to everybody, it sounds fair, but you have to show them what that would mean. And most people, it's going to be a significant increase, and a very small number of people will have a decrease. And when you tell them that, that has to be factored in.
So, in processing all of this data, it seems like we have a very big uphill battle, because 90% are satisfied. So you're starting with a base that says, I like what we have, I'm not sure about the change. And I think what you're saying is we have to show them the alternatives. I don't know how we do that. Because ideally, $120 for compost pickup is high. I mean, it's really high, so people see this, and I think we can't gauge complete interest by a sign up on this, right? Because you have surrounding communities that are able to work down and make a contract, and it's $5 extra a month, and, you know, and does that mean that they get a smaller cart for their trash? But I don't think people are putting all those pieces together, and I don't know how we do it. I mean, if Waste Connections could come up and give us development plans where if everyone went this way, would there be significant, like the price changes? So I feel, yeah.
We have asked that question because we, and I discussed that in this forum a couple of times over past meetings. Our thought was to see if we could get enough of a critical mass to bring down that cost in increments. So if we got, instead of 8 people, if we had 200 people, if we had 300 people. Waste Connections has come back and said, adamantly, they said, don't even go there, a minimum of 1,000 people before they would begin to talk any kind of break on that 120. So then you're faced with coercive or arbitrary decision that you're going to make everybody do it when everybody doesn't need it. I mean, that's the policy debate that the board would ultimately have to discuss. So.
And I don't think they're very clear that they don't want something required or a mandatory change, but I think it would be hard for us to see cost savings and waste reduction if a new contract wasn't made.
And remember, this is the same argument that came up, you may not remember, but when recycling was initiated like it was, this was the same argument. So sometimes it is all about looking at the big picture, like you're saying, and saying, is it a better idea if we just include it in our services?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, just look at, for example, for the 8 people that Waste Connections has to pick up now, they've got to send a truck around. And most of the time, they say there are only 1 or 2 of those 8 people who put it out. They don't have the critical mass to take it down to A1 or whoever it is, which is south of here. They take it to, they actually take it to EcoCycle. And what EcoCycle obviously does is consolidate these shipments from all these people that have relatively small amounts. So there's a logistics. That's why they say, my guess is if they had 1,000 or more people, they could direct it to, they could take it directly to a compostable dump. And that wouldn't have the economy of scale. But until you get there, they can't do it. And it is different in some ways from recycling, because everybody's got lots of recycling. Not everybody has a lot of compostables that they don't have other options for in this town.
Okay. Martin, can I ask a couple of questions? Have you asked for any sorts of bids as of yet?
No.
So you need some guidelines about options to consider in a bidding situation.
Sure, well, yes, in a way, but let me step back a little bit. So if you think back to the schedule that I talked about over the last couple of months, maybe December and January. So the big picture schedule for the town to enter into in a contract to provide waste pickup services goes through the town board. And the town board is looking for feedback from advisory committees like RPAC on policy issues like this. So we're in the exploratory stage, trying to figure out what might make sense to present as a recommendation for the board to include in their policy discussion of what would ultimately be included in the scope, that staff would be tasked with publicly bidding and then bringing back the solicitation results to the board. So we're kind of almost like step 2 of a 4 or 5 step process. But the overall driver is going to be the calendar. So by the end of this calendar year, our current contract with Waste Connections expires, and the staff is tasked with working with the board to make sure that an appropriate opportunity and alternative is provided for the community that makes sense for the community to begin on January 1st. Regardless of what that service looks like or who provides it, we want to make sure that we have the policy discussion and give the board an opportunity to make that decision.
Right. So it seems very clear that size of bin is a big concern for a lot of people. And I think it is not just, oh, I don't like having a big bin. It is honestly an issue of space, because some of the houses are fairly small. So I would think that it would make sense to investigate options that would include multiple bin sizes and get a sense of, get a sense of what kind of cost impact that would have. At the same time, I think it would not be difficult to investigate the pay-as-you-throw. I mean, it either could be variable bin sizes, everybody pays the same price, or variable bin sizes, prices go along with the bin size. So I feel like that is information that that would be important to pursue in the bidding process. I assume that when we bid, when you put this out, you can ask for different options. It's not just, one option would be continue as it is, but another option would be multiple sizes or pay-as-you-throw. Am I right, or am I wrong in that?
You are correct. The town can include in the bid schedule whatever the town wishes.
Okay.
And it would be up to the individual proposers or respondents to a bid solicitation what they wanted to include.
Yeah.
And then it's the discretion of the town.
Right.
To do whatever the town wishes with that.
So in my mind, the results of this survey would say that, yes, it is very much worth pursuing multiple bin sizes and possibly pay-as-you-throw. Until we get the bids, we aren't going to know what is going to fall within people's price tolerance and what is absolutely beyond consideration. I feel like the composting piece is, the majority of people do not want composting. So it would be hard to jump up and say, hey, we absolutely need to include composting in the contract. If we could get any pricing information that we can get, that the board can consider, I think is valuable, but the survey really, the bin size jumps out, both in the percentages and the individual comments.
Yeah, I agree that you sort of need like a menu in the way for your scope of what you want to get for the vendor cost seeking,
Right. If we were to go to a pay-as-you-throw, maybe one of the options for the people who really want recycling every week, maybe that could be a pay-as-you-throw option.
That was exactly the way it was done 3 years ago for this contract. I mean, they had all of these different options, and they even polled people on the options once they got the options. So this is a sort of a needs, a satisfaction survey, which is appropriate. But correct me if I'm wrong, but they actually had from the different vendors different options, A and B, different sizes. Number one. Number two, there is ability to get different sizes. Isn't there in your contract?
I think similar to the HOA's experience, you can ask for them, but it's up to the vendor whether or not they can supply them.
But I think I would encourage you to study the pricing, and was it Lafayette that just within the last couple of months signed their new contract? Louisville has pay-as-you-throw. Superior with 300, however many customers, is not going to do better than that. And those are fresh contracts, newly negotiated. So you can...
If I can just interrupt you, so I can't bring up the internet, but actually Lafayette has their recently approved contract as well as Louisville's is posted.
Right.
And just to provide a little bit of information, the compostables rate that I can't show on the screen, but I do have printed in front of me here for monthly service for curbside compostable collection for the city of Lafayette, 32-gallon weekly, for their service is $4.45 a week. 64-gallon is $7.79, and 96-gallon card is $11. So just to give you an idea of at least what the market rate is. It's sort of
$11.
5, 8, and $11.
$11 for a large bin of compostables.
Yes.
Weekly?
weekly.
The contract is monthly.
That's how I thought it was
Monthly?
Yeah,
Okay,
But it's weekly service.
monthly charge.
Monthly charge,
monthly charge.
which is close to our Rock Creek's charge for the entire thing. But, so anyway, I commend you to look at those studies, because that'll tell you what the price is. It's inconceivable to me that Superior would have the ability to negotiate better prices than those towns. Now, whether they have added to that in any way through their utility billing charges and so forth that they do internally, I wouldn't know. I don't know if you know anything about that, Martin, but
Are you referring to, including some administrative overhead?
right.
I'm not certain. I would assume it's similar to ours, where it's a straight pass-through.
Right. So, anyway, that'll give you a pretty good sense of the pricing of the different options.
So then you come down to a critical policy decision, right, and what the board may or may not. I mean, ultimately, paying almost nothing a month is nice and people can get rid of their trash, but in this day, in this community, in this county, would there really be a big uproar if a monthly trash bill increased by a few dollars a month? And to change the behavior, I mean, we're seeing it with everybody else around us, I feel like we should be taking a step forward with them. But again, I haven't been here long enough to really know board.
I can't speak for the board, but I can guess. If there's a large difference between the cost for the 300 from the Rock Creek cost, you're going to hear a lot of noise, especially when there's apparently a lot of satisfaction with the current service. They're going to look and see the difference right here in town, and that's going to be the driver.
Between that and then also what Jim mentioned earlier with the very strong response during the 2011 dialogue, the board heard very specifically that there was a number of residents who came down and shared that they weren't interested in paying any more. They were interested in paying the lowest amount possible. So that was a central element of that discussion.
So if the boards have a mind to force change in 300 people for policy reasons, I'm skeptical of that, but.
So, can I ask a question? There's a lot of new housing being built now. Will all of those houses be on the town contract?
Yes, they should be.
Okay.
Yes, they are. So exactly like Joe mentioned and then Jim mentioned earlier, the additional homes that have been built at Camopi.
Imagine they could opt. I mean, they could opt to join the HOA, the sub-HOA.
Well, they can't create their own.
No,
I mean, I thought when we passed the ordinance, existing contracts would continue.
At their discretion, if they wanted to.
At their discretion, and new services would be by the town.
That's exactly, I remember the document that you're referring to, Joe, and that's exactly right.
Just something just occurred to me, because I keep saying, reminding people, and I've said it many times in this forum, that Rock Creek is a relatively new community. We have down the drain, wash it down capability. Our systems are set to capture that. It's distilled into cake and sold as for recycling. But I guess even though they're in the same system, probably, the original town probably doesn't have that.
Probably
now that I think of it. So that may be one reason that.
I'm sorry.
What I'm saying is,
Tell me what they don't have.
Do they have disposals in most of the homes in the original town?
I would assume any house that's been built in the last few decades does, yes.
Well, I'd said in original town.
They haven't been.
So there may be people there who don't have the ability that Rock Creek has to, as far as food scraps, to use the drain. That never occurred to me before, but that may be one one consideration. But anyway, I do remind you that we do have that capability. We also have yard waste recycling, and a big part of the volume of organic recycling is the yard waste, which we do have almost very close to almost everybody. You do have to put it in a car, but it's there, and it gets composted and reused. So.
Yeah, not just composted and reused, but it comes back here to be provided to residents here at no charge. It's a service, a program that the town board initiated several years ago to provide compost free to residents here when it's available. Like, there have been some times over the last couple of summers when our provider actually runs out.
There's a nice pile of it available.
That is a great benefit that I'm not aware of happening in any other community.
Yeah, in the HOA, we're trying to understand this, because if people are thinking of food scraps and food waste and related, there are paper items and so forth that go with that, that's one thing. And the paper items, of course, can't go down the drain. But there seems to be an assumption that a big part of it is yard waste, but that's so cyclical, so seasonal. That
Leaves in the fall.
well, you get some grass, but I'm just, that's the other question. What do we really need it for? Is it for yard waste? Is it for food scraps? I think we really want to understand that before we look seriously at it anyway.
I think I agree, Jim. I think that's why Lafayette and the other jurisdictions who provide that are able to provide that monthly rate, but they have to spread it out over the course of the year. Where here it's a subscription service just during the peak of the landscape season.
I think it's similar to, I don't know if they do year-round. Do they do year-round?
Yeah. It's one of the ways to spread out the cost.
Yeah.
But the total cost is pretty close, for 96.
Yeah, to the subscription service that's available currently through Waste Connections at the $6 and change is at least, in the order of magnitude similar to what our neighbors are paying year-round.
No, so I think based on the conversations that we definitely want to recommend that the board have more of a menu, quote unquote, for seeking out pricing so that you can put together something maybe a little bit more suitable, not locked down as hard as it has been. And then also, I really liked your point of sometimes kind of have to make the change. Again, I'm going to reiterate that this happened with the recycling within the past 10 years or so, and there was some moaning and groaning and whatnot, but when it came down to it, everybody was thankful that we had more frequent recycling and better recycling bins, and the cost was fairly nominal overall, so I think that if you had similar approach to the composting and whatnot, trying to do something in original town, that you'd get an okay reception as long as you tailored some other things which would maybe balance out some of the additional cost, because you could probably have a lower additional cost for the composting if they weren't having such big trash cans and still keeping their biweekly recycling.
It would be really nice if we could use pay-as-you-throw, and if people could downsize on trash and use that and come out fairly even. One thing that I think it's really important to point out when you're looking at Lafayette and even Louisville, both of those communities have lots and lots of small houses comparable to the size of some of the houses in Old Town, and there's definitely a much larger low-income community in both Louisville and Lafayette, where, in terms of households that would be very price sensitive.
That's probably one of the reasons it receives so much dialogue in those communities, both pro and con. The desire to have the sustainability-oriented benefits versus the ability to tolerate a price increase. I can't show it on the screen, but I can read to you what the current monthly rates are in Lafayette for trash and recycling service. So the smallest container that you can have is a 32-gallon, and the monthly charge is $9.40. And then, like Jim mentioned, there's an additional administrative cost of 15 cents, so it would be $9.55. 64 gallons is $17.65.
Did you say that was trash and recycling?
Yes, together. It's a coupled rate. And then the 96 gallon, the large size that everyone has, either whether or not they're in the HOA or in original town, the larger size, is $25.90. So getting to your point, Michelle, yes. So out of those rates, if you have the smaller the bin, definitely you pay almost 3 times less.
And what do they pay right now?
Right now, they're paying
Here.
$9.65. So the rate that somebody would be paying as a Lafayette resident for the smallest container for trash and recycling, here, you're able to have a much higher level of service, or more capacity at least in the cans. You get 2 96-gallon cans here, whereas if for the same amount of money, or of almost the same amount of money, you would receive a 32-gallon trash container and then a full-size 96-gallon recycling.
And I think it's tricky because no matter what, we have to remember, and I know you're going to go out to the general businesses that provide the service to get a quote, but the reality is we are all currently with the same waste provider, just under different contracts. And, we obviously, I think, see some price benefit because of that.
Yes, you're absolutely right. There was quite a lot of discussion in the board joint meeting Monday night. In fact, there was a fairly strong sentiment, I think you'd agree, and from members of the board to try to have a common program, a common offering. We don't see how we could we could address that in a single contract, and our position is the town can easily, we have it set up in our contract that the town can get in on our contract if they want, but it would be a town contract that the town would opt for. But there's no question that the pricing that the town enjoys now to some extent is just a political reality that Waste Connections understands that they've got to be somewhat consistent with Rock Creek. And another thing people forget when you talk about Louisville and Lafayette, when you look at the municipal contracts, in a way similar to what we have, they've got a very diverse housing stock to serve. So they have some requirement to allow that variation to a great degree. But remember, Louisville and Lafayette, and this may be more true of Lafayette than Louisville, have large parts of their population that are in HOAs that have contracts just like Rock Creek does. So that's taken out of their equation too. So.
It is a good point.
Yeah, it is. You're right, and that actually is a very valid point. The percentage is much lower in Lafayette and Louisville versus here. Here it's what, 90?
Yeah, we have an unusual situation because essentially it's like 70% of the homes, but.
The town didn't even get in the business till 2006, was it, or 2008, 2008?
2008, I think, was the first contract. So yes, it's absolutely, the point Jim raises is a valid one. So any HOA is able to enter into their own agreement, and sometimes just as a matter of happenstance or coincidence, the larger jurisdiction around them or neighboring HOAs, if they're provided service by the same vendor, might receive a better price just because of the convenience, the logistics, having trucks already in the neighborhood, already having routes set up, that makes sense to do everything all at once rather than having a separate hauler come in. And that was, again, one of the dialogue items that came up a lot during the board's previous discussion on this, was the impact of having several haulers and the potential price savings of having one hauler, and then the price savings of having the one hauler be the same provider who provides the service to the HOA. It's not coincidental.
And there's a value to limiting the number of times trucks are going through town.
Yeah.
I wonder if we couldn't advertise on the newsletter, on the next newsletter, and say, don't need your big trash cans. Do you want a smaller one? You can call Waste Connections to swap out, and see if we can keep in touch with the guy over there at Waste Connections to say, you know what, we've gotten a lot of calls and a lot of requests to see a simple way of demand. People may not know, but if somebody's looking at it and then they popped across their desk, that would be a volunteer way.
Yeah, except what they'll do is, if you were successful with that, they would probably say, that's how we can get more bins for Rock Creek. So they'll take the large bins from the town customers and give them a small bin, and then use that because they need more bins in Rock Creek because a lot of them are getting old. But I'll give you an example. I mean, I see where you're going, and there's some logic to that, but Rock Creek is all single-family homes with the exception of the Summit. And the Summit townhomes, there we do have a problem. They don't want the big ones because they just don't have any place for them. You know, the garages are how it's set up over there. So what we have to do to get them the smaller ones is when Waste Connections has a contract that changes or something somewhere and some become available, we have to stay after them and say, okay, this happened about 3 months ago or 6 months ago, somewhere in the last half a year. They had, okay, we've got like 30 smaller bins. So we called the Summit, the HOA, it's a sub-HOA bars, but we go to the Summit and we say, look, they've got 30 bins. So what the Summit does is they send out a thing, one shot only, on Monday the 5th.
First come, first serve?
First come, first serve, and that's about the best we've been able to do for those folks. So I don't think you're going to find that that's going to get very far.
But that means that signals demand, then.
But that's Summit. We don't get that from Rock Creek.
But maybe people don't know. I mean, you know, we got a smaller one, and I wondered if there was a volunteer demand, it might signal that people would prefer a smaller trash bin.
I'm sure there are people who do it. It's just that the economics are set up to do, you know, one size fits all. That's the way our contract is done. So once you start getting involved with, other than opportunistically, as I just described, once you start offering different sizes, different choices, that's not what our contract is, and we're not going to be able to fulfill that. And the costs would go up. It's tough. That one's a tough one.
So if I can jump in here, so at the last 15 minutes of the meeting, I wanted to maybe perhaps try to make a segue to the May 26th meeting of the board. The board's has a discussion item set for that evening on the agenda that the town manager is working from to go over exactly what the upshot of this conversation is, what makes sense to include in the scope. So I took some of the items that were in our last solicitation and just copied and pasted and just updated a little bit of the verbiage in this. So if we wanted to go through some of these and see if some of this resonates with you or might make sense to start from, or any changes that you might be interested. And then I added a couple of alt items at the bottom. So if you aren't familiar with traditional bid processes, you have a base bid, and then you can have some additive alternative items at the bottom that would be over and above what's in the base bid. Those would be elective. So single hauler, monthly per household price for trash and recycling service on the same day every week, or weekly, as the previous one had. Two options to provide this, and again, 2 notes here just in this description. So single hauler, not having multiple haulers, so an agreement with one person to do all of the waste service here, and then on the same day and every week. So I condensed a couple of ideas there. So 2 options: a fixed price for weekly 96-gallon trash service and bi-weekly 96-gallon recycling service is what's provided now. And then if there was an alternative for the pay-as-you-throw approach, the volume-based or unit-based approach, increments of 32. So 32, 64, 96. Very similar to what I just read from Lafayette. What would those prices be? And then if somebody wanted additional 96-gallon carts, actually that's an item that would be really for both, because as you saw in the comments, there were some folks who they wanted trash pickup once a month, and some people wanted another cart every week, so that, again, we're trying to get the majority of the folks most of the time. So an additional 96-gallon cart for each.
Can you add in a line item for weekly recycling?
Or,
It's weekly trash, I'm sorry, so I skipped over here, trash and recycling.
Right, but you still have it as bi-weekly recycling. I would really like to see what the price would be for weekly recycling be.
You read it.
Oh, there it is, okay.
Item as an alternate.
Right. Yeah. Another option, another way to provide this level of service for recycling would be to offer 2 recycling bins to be picked up every other week.
Sure.
But for, that might be something the hauler would be more feasible for a hauler.
I'm sorry, what was it?
So rather than having one bin that's picked up every week, have two bins that are picked up every other week?
Yes, just for the people that want an extra, that have more recycling. You know, the recycling doesn't get smelly or go bad sitting around.
So
think that's
two
good.
carts
Kind of another-
bi-weekly.
Well, where you can purchase an additional 96 gallon for trash, what would the cost be to purchase an additional 96 gallon for recycling?
Yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
that's contemplated in the agreements for Lafayette and Lewisville. I just-
No, but that'd be good. Well, we're just trying to fulfill.
That's an interesting idea, sure, let me add that to
I
the
could
list.
move to original town based on the recycling service alone, so. that's good.
Okay, I'll add that as an alt item here. So let's maybe go through this list. So pay-as-you-throw approach, the unit-based for 96 gallon card. So that language is incorrect from the previous one. So individual prices for 32, 64, 96, and then if somebody was interested in an additional one. So if the group's interested in having the fixed price, flat rate, and then also the pay-as-you-throw, so before we move on from that, does that make sense to include as part of the dialogue with the board as a starting point?
I think this does make sense. The one caveat that I would do is under item A, I would make it fixed price for a maximum of 96 gallon trash. I think there are enough people who are really interested in smaller trash cans that even regardless of the price, there are some people who want smaller cans just for space reasons. And if there is any way to honor that in a new contract.
Sure, what would you suggest for the change?
She said weekly maximum 96 gallon.
Weekly maximum.
Yeah, so sort of, like you said, trying to allow people to change their cart size. I wouldn't just say change their price, but there's people that would be okay with that. They just want a smaller bin.
Yeah, right.
So that one-size-fits-all approach would,
It'd be one price.
one price, but it wouldn't be one size.
So it's essentially
Right.
like B, except you're saying A would be the same thing for a
Well, but-
rate, and B would be additional.
It'd be the same price for all, but what she's trying to say is based on, I think, what Jim was saying, the inability to get a certain size container, that if it was in the contract that people could request a smaller container at their discretion without a change in price, that we'd be able to do that. That's
Yeah.
basically what she's trying to get to write in, if I'm
Right.
reading right.
Right, because then I think because then you could get pricing that is based on, you know, a more efficient model of picking up service. You don't have to do the extra billing and administrative stuff.
Okay, so just so I understand. so
Okay.
Tell me how that, a little bit like Jim mentioned, so if you have a maximum of 96 gallon trash service at a flat rate or a fixed price in A, and then you had a pay-as-you-throw unit-based price for increments of 32 gallons, like in B, I guess the difference there, the variability in those is price then, because you're both offering the same service options and they're both the same cart sizes, and then it's whether or not you have a price break, or you have to, I'm trying to think of a way to depict that. So Lafayette has the 96 gallon be more than 3 times more expensive than the 32 gallon.
Right.
To maximize or incentivize having less landfill waste.
Yes.
You'd be doing the opposite with A, have a fixed price, and then also
So
have the same
she's
service.
wondering if there would be some savings in there so that you could leave out an administrative headache or a billing headache. And you said, okay, we'll take the contract, this is gonna be our flat rate month fee, but if somebody chooses to throw away less, they're not looking for a cost savings. If they want their 96 one, they can get their 96 one, but they're cutting out more the,
Sure. I'd be glad to include that, but I think anecdotally, just from seeing some of the experiences over the last year, that there will be a price impact, and the price impact will be up whenever you introduce a new element of variability, but I'd be glad to include that.
well, yeah.
You know, certainly if you want to have it priced different, have it as an option and not in the base price, that is totally fine. That is totally fine, but I do
You have an
think-
option to
Yeah.
size that.
Just keep in mind, as you go into these approaches, particularly pay-as-you-go, there's another element which Martin's aware of, but I haven't addressed here. And that is, so someone downsizes to a smaller bin, and then you get lots of variation in what you have to throw out. So all of a sudden, you've got more than goes in the bin. You have to buy a tag for $3 or $4 to put on any bag you put out in addition to that bin. So anyone who thinks that they're going to downsize and save money that way, they've got to take into account how many instances will they have to buy stickers, which can add another $3 or $4 per bag of trash that you put out. Now, right now, in Rock Creek, they'll pretty much take anything you put out. We don't have stickers, and that's part of the beauty of it. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that point, Jim, so the city of Lafayette, if you are interested in purchasing additional stickers to have, if you have a week or a season in which you need to have additional pickup, you don't necessarily want to have a larger cart, the stickers for 32-gallon bags are $4 each. So when you need the additional capacity, you can purchase it. Okay, so just make sure I understand this is the additional idea to include in the scope. So a fixed price for a maximum of a 96-gallon trash and bi-weekly 96-gallon recycling, but have a choice for either 32, 64, or 96-gallon trash service. Okay, so I'll work to include that in here.
Okay, thanks.
So the two options for the weekly trash and recycling or bi-weekly, depending on either of the two options. Anything I'm missing or makes sense to include there? We can come back to this on email this too for further review. Next, bulk item pickup service, having a price per item. Like we talked about, there is an annual bulk item event this year. Would it make sense to include that as part of our waste contract? So a one-day cleanup event, door to door, and figure out what that fee would be, and then the bulky items would include metal and non-metal as well as the Freon-containing appliances.
I think if having it in there, people would let people want, and having that option is great. I mean, and if they want to have a cleanup event, or if they want to, see what the price is, or if they want to pay per household if they participate, but, I think like you were saying, a lot of people really liked that event, took advantage of it.
I think that's a great idea.
Well, the number, you have the numbers. It was 1,000 or something?
1,300 people and 1,350 or so participated last year, and it was about $54,000.
Which is almost half in Rock Creek. I mean, it's at least a third of the households, almost a third of the households in the town. And I still think that because a lot of people, mine got all taken away before the service even came. So
No, it's like I missed
a lot of
having those
people
people
buy into
drive around and
neighbors.
pick everything up. We really lost an opportunity there this year. It's a very big shame.
And sometimes people think that
Yes.
So it might be a budget item to consider for recommending as a policy change for next year.
Yeah.
Wanted to have a
Agreed.
recommendation for the board.
Yes.
Yes, good point.
They just need to deal with changing it instead of keeping it the way.
But it was something that I had seen in a couple of other contracts is included as part of an RFP, so I wanted to raise that as an option here to include that as something that could be integrated into the trash contract rather than as a separate annual service that's included independently, integrated into this contract. Special services, so rollout services for residents who might need some help getting their carts out. There's special service options that are provided through some vendors, so I wanted to include that here for anybody who wanted to.
That would be a different vendor who would service those.
Well, I don't know. I haven't seen the results. I can't bring up, like I mentioned, without the internet, I can't bring up what some of the other submittals were. Extra charges, so vacation stops, there are some additional extra fees that are included in some trash contracts, so I wanted to note those here. And the individual proposers who would submit to an RFP like this need to have those included. And then, like we talked about, having performance standards, response times, how customer complaints, how new services initiated, how much lead time, things like that. Some of the logistics of establishing and maintaining service.
Can we add to, just to keep getting data collection from them?
Yeah.
I know you could just make sure, mandate or reporting.
Sure, that's included, like we talked about, that's in our contract now, and it's something that would be carried forward. And you're right, that would be included as a performance standard.
Okay.
Just thought it should be noted there, but yeah.
So those are kind of the basics. What kind of service and how often, whether it's fixed price or volume-based, and then some additional items like bulk item or special services, and making sure that, like Kim mentioned, having performance standards and reporting criteria included in the scope makes sense, or those were kind of the basic ones that were in our previous agreement. I saw in a couple of other agreements that have been approved in this area, and then some potential alternative items. So like Michelle read my mind, so the first one, so the weekly recycling service, to go from the bi-weekly that's provided now, to enhance that to provide weekly recycling service, what would that be? A potential additional alternative item, curbside compost service, having it either weekly or bi-weekly, and what that cart size might look like.
Or even like once, or like just a fall, like in the, like if it's cyclical, is that an option that we could maybe have?
Sure.
Like a leaf
yeah.
cleanup, save all your yard trash?
So we call that what, fall leaf organics event?
Good. Good catch.
And I want to think that was included in, I know it's in Lafayette, so I don't know if it's in Louisville's. So Louisville's, or Lafayette service provider is Western Disposal, and as part of the value-added services with their program, they include a citywide curbside bulk pickup once a year, so like was included in this scope, as part of their ongoing expense, no additional expense for that. And then a free, they offer compost for us, and then they also do a free or an integrated for the overall cost, but a fall leaf and limb curbside pickup every fall. So that is an added service in some other agreements that are in this area. Natural gas powered fleet. I've seen that in a couple of agreements, wanted to raise it here as a potential.
How many of those are around?
I think Western Disposal went to an all natural gas powered fleet this year.
Who else?
I don't know. But it's a potential.
It's only one.
Yeah, I just don't want to limit too much, I wouldn't think. But I guess that's an alternative, that might be a feel-good thing. But local preference, I'm not sure we're doing that at all. And
If any of them have trucks that don't use hydraulic fluid, that would be nice.
Yeah,
That's the
just,
biggest problem.
again, they're gonna skip it.
So those are the potential additional alternative items that I just run across in a cursory glance at some of the bids that my predecessor in this position had, and I was able to find this morning before the internet uploading, before Comcast decided to ruin.
how about alternative internet service?
Okay, no, I think that looks great.
Right
yeah.
at 7, so we had a chance to go through, those were the main things I was hoping to get through with the group. So a little bit of background on the questionnaire, and then just some potential scope elements to include for the discussion with the board on the 26th.
Which is, how do you want to get feedback, if any, between now and then?
Well, I'm going to send this to the group, and I'll think of some better language for the 1A alternative there, and then forward this to the group, and then ask you if you want to make some changes or adds, or give the folks who aren't here tonight a chance to either listen to this if the recording happened. Well, I guess the recording did happen with the VCR tape, but either listen to the dialogue or have a chance to share their feedback, and then just email the group. I'll email the notes, and then I'll ask. Like I've done in the past, when we talk about some of these kind of bigger picture items that you have to kind of chew on. Not that you necessarily need homework, but have a chance to just synthesize the information a little bit and then think about any changes or suggestions you'd like to make. Just reply and copy the group, and then I'll include it in a final version. And then like we've talked about in the past, when the board is considering an item as part of their regular meeting agenda, the Wednesday before is when staff is tasked with assembling the meeting packet. So that Wednesday before is when I'll work to include some information for the town manager to consider including in the meeting packet for that meeting on the 26th. So I'll be prompting you for some dates, for some responses, for anybody that has some interest in providing.
So when do you think you'll be able to get this out to the group then? By mid next week?
Oh, probably.
Oh wait, no, it has to be before then, yeah.
No, I'm planning on, I'll probably be here for a while tonight, and then I'll work on it probably tomorrow.
Yeah, because you have to have that to the town manager by next Wednesday, then the 20th. Okay, perfect, thank you. All right.
Yeah, so the members of the committee will have, some time over the weekend if they have a chance to to glance at this, and then if they don't have a chance to look at it until they're back in the office or plug back into the world if they're out of town over the weekend and check it Mondays, we'll have a couple of days
All right.
to take a look.
Great, thanks, Martin. So I guess that's it. Close it out. So I guess we adjourn informally or whatever.
Touch on that.
Steve's out there. I think the plan says right on the final cells, it says the FTP moving the hate ditch. I was wondering if that moving the ditch.
No, well, some of it's going to be for some of the excavation works, so here's the problem. So there might be some temporary storage. There'd be some excavation. It would be fine. Sure.
Oh, jeez. I better get with it.